All right, well, I feel like there are no two better people to have this conversation with. And so we're going to dive right into what I think is the most obvious question, which is, why is security such a hard problem to solve? Jeff, we're going to start with you.
I think security is a hard problem to solve because it is such a human issue. You know, we sit there and say simple things like strong, unique passwords for every login. Well, as humans, we're not set up to remember a single strong, unique password, let alone all of them. And I think the other challenge from almost a psychology perspective is we've been trained so much that security is difficult. When it becomes easier through tools or processes, we almost don't believe it. So I think there's that psychological side of it as well, which says we have to demonstrate to people that it is secure for them to believe that.
Yeah, and I feel like, and John, you guys at Cloudflare see this maybe from another perspective. I think about the average person doesn't think about security until something goes wrong, right? They don't think about, do I need unique passwords? Is this website I'm visiting really the website that I think it is? Is this email really legit? From the perspective of looking at it from an infrastructure standpoint, why do you think security is such a hard problem?
I think we ask too much of people. In particular, I think that it's easy if you're in the security world to see all of the threats there are to a system. And we put a huge cognitive load on people around, you need to think about all these things. And we should actually focus people on the things that really are going to matter, are going to make the big difference. But second of all, the tools should just do it for us. I mean, we're just asking too much of people. And you talk about the average person, but I mean, the average person really doesn't understand any of the issues. And somehow, those of us who do security, I think, risk thinking that they should learn about this stuff when they have no interest and no time at all.
So you said focus on the things that matter. What are those? What are the things that really matter?
Well, look, I mean, my one piece of advice to people is, if you do not have a good password on your email, the rest of your life is pretty much wide open because every single service out there does reset password by sending you an email. So I mean, if I can compromise your email, I can compromise pretty much everything else you have. So I mean, just getting people to do that would be one huge step up. We'd say care about that.
Well, and not only that, but a lot of the services that we use outsource their security to, say, Google or to Microsoft. You just log right in with your Google email address and your password. So not only can you get the reset, you can just log right into the services, right?
Yes, absolutely, that too. Although in some ways that's actually a little bit better because Google itself can enforce some things like, wait a minute, you've never logged in from this device before, or some extra factors on top of it. But I just think that overall we ask too much of people when it comes to security, and it's on us to make it simple.
So Jeff, thinking about what's at stake, right? I get notifications on my Apple devices all the time that'll say something like, this password was found in a security breach. And I'm a tech journalist, and I just ignore it. I just move on with my life, and unless I try to log into my bank account one day and I can't because the password's been changed, it doesn't really seem like it affects me, but I know that it does. Can you help quantify for people what is really at stake here?
I look at it and I get asked, by a lot of the folks I know, is my bank secure? And I say, for the most part, yes. You can assume that your bank is quite secure and they're taking the proper precautions. But if you're using that same or a similar password or set of credentials on your cat picture sharing website that you don't care about, then all of a sudden that puts your bank at risk. So when you look at something like a breach, it may be a service that you're saying, I don't really care about. But if you're using a similar password or a similar approach to sites that you do care about, that's where you're most at risk. We ran a little bit of a research project a couple of years ago, and it's probably only gotten worse since then, that says, how easy is it to guess a password? And we gave that out to the ethical research community and had a little bit of a contest. And it turns out that for $100 worth of electricity, you can have 10 billion guesses. So then you have to sit there and say, am I protecting more than $100 worth of stuff with this password? And do I think it can survive 10 billion guesses? For many people, if you're just doing that through your own contraption and your own, making up the passwords, the answer is absolutely you can't survive 10 billion guesses. So there's a lot at risk financially and from an identity perspective. And I think both of those are quite concerning for people.
And John, there was a Verizon report that says something like 68% of breaches involve some form of human error. I'm not exactly sure how you quantify that. Like somebody put the wrong password in the wrong place, or somebody didn't protect something the way that it was supposed to. And for a company like Cloudflare, like the consequences for something like that are massive, right? Because you guys are the underpinning for a lot of the internet that most people use on a regular basis. So what are the things that you are thinking about internally to sort of prevent that from happening?
Well, I mean, the biggest thing we worried about internally was phishing, right? Because we constantly get people trying to trick our employees into typing in their password. And we completely eliminated phishing, completely, by giving everybody a hardware key, a YubiKey, actually two, and that just ends phishing. And I think that for us, that was a huge step, because it just doesn't matter if an employee falls for a phish, because the attacker can't log in. And so they don't even have to think about it. And so that's what I mean by removing the cognitive load, because it's like, well, don't worry about it, you made a mistake. And so it has no consequence. And so after that, then you start worrying about other things, like, what's the threat of an insider being bribed or something like that? And then again, you have technical controls around what people have access to. So I think that, we worry about a whole variety of threats because we're being attacked from every angle because people want to break into the systems. I'm not surprised by the 68% figure, but I think it just is an indication that we've made security too hard for people, and we should not be blaming people for having, made a mistake that ended in a security problem.
Yeah, and the trade-off is always between convenience and security, right? And even in the example that you just gave, having a hardware key introduces a level of friction, but in an organization like Cloudflare, that's worth it. But most people are not necessarily willing to go to that extent. It's why password managers exist, right? Because you're telling a person, you only need to literally remember one password and we'll handle the rest of it. And yet for a lot of people, that's still too much, right? They're still using the same passwords over and over again because it's just convenient. I recently set up a new device and I had to put my password in like 15 different services. Some of them use passkeys, some of them use passwords, some of them I had saved in one password, so it didn't take me as long. But the reality is, at the end of it, I just want to like blow the whole thing up and just get it all going. How do you think about balancing those two things? This convenience, because if it's not convenient enough, people are just like, I'm not going to abide by this security protocols.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I agree completely in terms of we need tools to help the people, right? Security is going to be a challenge for human beings if we don't provide them some sense of tool. But for most businesses, productivity is going to take over. If you look at any business, and again, you and I are both in security businesses, and we are going to treat things differently, but if you look at the average business, at the end of each year, every employee is likely to get a personal evaluation. And very few of those employees are going to get their personal evaluation based on how strong their passwords were, right, or how secure their devices are. That's not what people get evaluated on. They're going to be evaluated on the productivity related to their role. So we have to think of it from a business point of view and a human point of view of that is going to be their primary driver for the bulk of their year and the bulk of their business life. How do we then give them the tools that make it possible for them to have an easy approach and a good approach to security in a way that they actually recognize is beneficial to them? People don't want to be unsecure, but they're willing to do very little to stay secure. So the approach we've always taken is, how do we actually flip it? How do we actually sit there and say, you can actually be more productive with a security tool like 1Password than you can be without it. You can use now devices like your personal devices that you may not otherwise be allowed to use. You can bring in some apps that are productivity apps that your company hasn't deployed from an enterprise perspective, and you can start to be more productive in your role at that company, but done so in a way that the company understands their level of security is maintained. And I think that's going to be the interesting challenge as we continue to move forward into a SaaS environment, into a bring your own device environment where companies are saying, we need to grow, we need to prosper, but on the other hand, the security team is rightfully saying, well, we need to make sure that we're secure while doing so.
I would add one other thing. The other thing we did at Cloudflare was we eliminated shame. So we took away any shame about making a mistake, and we actually encouraged people to speak up about anything security related. We have an internal mailing list. It gets tens of emails per day from employees about a weird email they got. Oops, I clicked on an attachment. I'm not sure about this website. And if you eliminate shame around it, then I think you get a lot more interest in security, because people will be like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm not going to get into trouble. And I actually remember an instance where there was someone on my team who fell for a fish and was in a terrible state, thinking they were going to get fired, which they were definitely not going to get fired because the YubiKey had saved the company anyway. And I think that's an important thing. And there's a lot of shame around, you've made a mistake. And actually, one of the most hilariously stupid things at Cloudflare is we are forced to do phishing exercises by external parties who want to verify that we're good at phishing. And they all get caught within about a minute, because some employee forwards the fish to the internal mailing list saying, this is definitely phishing. So if you eliminate shame, then I think that makes a big difference to people.
I do like the idea that at Cloudflare, one of the interview questions must be, are you good at phishing? So one of the things I know, John, that's kind of dear to your heart is this idea of CAPTCHAs, right? We've been doing this on the internet for a very long time. No one likes CAPTCHAs. I think we sort of understand that the idea is to make sure that it's really a person trying to access a website, but no one gets up in the morning excited about identifying motorcycles or school buses or whatever. This seems like it's one of those things technology should have solved by now, and yet every day we do this and sometimes it's almost to the detriment of whatever website I'm trying to log into, because I might just be like, I just don't want to do this today, and it's not important enough for me to continue on. So how do we solve things like that where the friction is so much that it's just annoying people?
Well, first of all, it's not dear to my heart. I freaking hate CAPTCHAs to the point where they are just awful. And, I think any website that's using CAPTCHAs, when you come across it, you're like, you hate your users. And I actually had to do one earlier today. There are so many things wrong with CAPTCHAs that we could do a whole 20-minute, but in brief, they're very bad for people with any sort of disability, and frankly, we're all only temporarily able-bodied because, we're going to have eyesight problems, all sorts of things like that. They're culturally insensitive. I don't know what a freaking American fire hydrant looks like. I can tell you it doesn't look like a British one. And they're just a disaster area. So what we did at Cloudflare was we introduced this thing called Turnstile, which what it attempts to do is identify the device that's being used and validate that it is a known device. And on top of that, the other problem with CAPTCHAs is they're not privacy preserving, because typically a third party, such as Google, is doing it. So the other thing we did with Turnstile is we did it in a privacy preserving way using cryptography. So we can say, we know what this device is, but we can't track you. And that has made a big, we completely eliminated the use of CAPTCHA at Cloudflare, 100%. And replace it with Turnstile. And that's a free service we give away to people. They can do the same thing. If they want to have some assurance that the device that is contacting you is known, is not misbehaving, and is essentially, human without proof of human ability. So yes, I may start to, go red in the face because I can't stand CAPTCHAs. It's so bad.
So I should have said it's a thing you're passionate about.
There you go. Yeah. They're not dear to my heart.
So looking to the future, it feels as though there are a lot of technological solutions, passkeys, for example, to help make things more seamless for people, and yet those also introduce their own levels of complexity. Plus, all of our security paradigm is sort of based on what we think computers can do today, and that's changing rapidly with quantum computing in the future. Apple recently talked about how its messages protocol is encrypted to resist quantum computing. Yeah. I'm saying words I don't even know what they mean. Tell me, how do we build these systems that are not going to put so much friction in, but are going to protect us into the future.
Well, I mean, when you're talking about post-quantum cryptography, I mean, this is akin to the year 2000 problem, right? The year 2000 problem was that everyone stored the dates as 2 digits, and when we got to 99, it flipped over to 00, and a bunch of computers were likely to go haywire. We had this deadline, right? We knew we had to fix everything. Well, the thing about quantum computing is we know we have a deadline. The deadline is that at some point someone's going to have a working quantum computer that can break the cryptography we have today. Unfortunately, we don't know what the deadline is. It could be next year or 30 years. So the only choice is today to introduce post-quantum cryptography. Luckily, we have all that. The research has been done. Cloudflare has spent the last 5 or 6 years working on practical applications of post-quantum. We know today how to secure connections, communications, in a way that a future quantum computer, when it arrives, cannot break them. And so I think the reality of post-quantum stuff is we have the algorithms, we have the implementations, we even have standards from NIST. We should just implement it. And that's what Cloudflare did. We implemented it. We include it for all of our customers, because one of the sort of latent evils in the technology industry is people are going to start trying to charge extra for post-quantum resistance, and they absolutely should not. It needs to be included, because it's a real threat to everything we do in our way of life on the internet. And so we know how to do this. It's just a question of rolling it out. And we are seeing from our largest customers, the banks, et cetera, a real drive to use post-quantum. So this is coming. This is just an inevitable situation.
Yeah, and as we wrap up, Jeff, I would just love to hear your thoughts on the same thing, as we are just creating new technology to help fight against this while also making those solutions easier for people to use.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, quantum is a great example of that, where I think it's the tool's responsibility, the service's responsibility to take that away and abstract that away from a concern that the end user has. And when we look at it from an encryption point of view, the specific encryption routines that are used, whether it's today non-crypto or not quantum proof encryption, or in the future where there will be quantum proof encryption, that should be an implementation detail. We look at it that way. We can switch out the encryption routines much at will. But the rest of the folks shouldn't have to worry about that. They should know that it's the companies that are security companies like ours that are going to do that on their behalf, going to continue to invest in both the research and in the actual execution of those types of processes, so that they can stay safe without having to worry about what it means in the modern cryptography world.
Well, John and Jeff, I really appreciate your time. I did not have clapping for anti-CAPTCHA on my bingo card for this talk, but I am glad that we had some fans of your thoughts on that. And I appreciate all of you joining us for this time. And to the two of you especially, thanks for helping us to make security more simple.
Thank you very much.